Hi, Purpose Partner. Welcome to another episode of Rise to Your Purpose, a personal and spiritual development podcast for female entrepreneurs with a mission. We are your hosts, Brandie and Natalie.
We are founders of Victorious Entrepreneurs Rising, where we guide women to build profitable businesses online through diversifying your income, using kingdom principles in marketing, and operating in a spirit of rest so that you can create kingdom impact.
After this episode, be sure to join our Purpose Partner Facebook community and get your copy of our Rise to Your Purpose devotional so we can continue to serve you as we partner together in our faith and business. Let's dive into today's episode. All right, so I'm here with my dear friend Jodeen Barba, and we're kind of come today and just discuss the messy middle. And I know you guys have been listening to the last few episodes, and I've just received a lot of good feedback from my journey of going through the messy middle. And so Jodeen is one of my dear friends. We just met like last August, but I feel like I've known her forever. We just have very similar life experiences and journeys with our businesses, and so we both love talking about rest, and we've both been leaders in different organizations, and we've both kind of dismantled and deconstructed things, and now we're entering into these new seasons of God just showing us how to rest. What does leadership look like? What does it look like to rely on God? And there's just so many different components of where we're at in our journey. So I just wanted to bring Jodeen on today and just share her journey too with you, and we're just gonna have a conversation, like I said, uncut and unedited. And so thanks, Jodeen, for hopping on with me today.
Absolutely. I love this. I love just these real raw like conversations. We're just recording our conversation, and it's just amazing to me how we haven't even known each other for a year, and we haven't even met in person.
No.
But it's like, I just feel like I've known you. Like, we are definitely, our souls are connected. And right from the beginning, last fall, we were in such a similar place, like trying to figure out what our next steps were, and just like both of us experiencing so much burnout when it came to like network marketing and leading a team and just life in general. Like, we were just so burnt out and financially like oppressed.
Yes.
Remember that? Like, we were both just
last year was rough.
So rough, so stressful. But there's so much, like, I like the word that you used earlier when we were talking before the recording, as deconstructing, like it kind of deconstructing some of that stuff and relaying the foundation of our lives. And it's, as human beings, it's going to be imperfect. And there's times when we need to take a step back and listen to the Lord of what he's telling us, and relaying the foundation and rewiring our mindset. That's more in tune and aligned with him, because we can easily get off track.
Yeah. I feel like the last year specifically, but even just the last few years, it has been a journey of truly practicing the ways of Jesus and learning more about him and his ways, and how it really, when you do start turning your life fully to Jesus and you're practicing his ways, it conflicts, and it also convicts you in a lot of different areas. And so you start, like, you are dismantling and deconstructing these behavior modifications that you've been set up to believe and live out for years. At least that's my experience. And so I think that's why when I was in this, last year, but even again, I feel like I'm in this messy middle again of just like, oh man, this is hard. It hurts. It just feels messy. It just feels like out of control, because I'm literally ripping off these belief systems, these behaviors, these habits that really are not serving me anymore. And they're not in alignment with the woman that God's calling me to be and that he created me to be. And so as I step more fuller into the identity and the authority that he has given me, and I understand that more, and I'm like, actually have a heart and desire for more of Jesus and for more of the way that he lived and practices, I'm like, oh, rest is a thing. Oh, okay. Jesus rested, and that's the thing I can do. I can do that too. And oh, I can weep. It's okay to grieve, and like go into the garden and grieve, and like literally, I mean, I haven't bled tears, but like have that experience where you're just like in so much mourning, and there's space for that. There's space to weep and mourn and grieve, and that's beautiful and not, looked down upon or seen as a sign of weakness. And oh, I can lead quietly and I can lead maybe without talking or being on this big stage. And so, yeah, it's been a really interesting journey to, like I said, deconstruct these beliefs and mindsets over the last couple of years. And I feel like God's taken me on a whole nother, like ripping off another layer of what that's been for me.
So hard. It's not easy for
Yes.
sure, but it's so necessary. Something that comes to mind when you're talking about that is just the pruning. Like there's spiritual pruning that happens in our life, and it's painful. It's not meant to be easy, but it's so necessary. And it doesn't even mean that like, oh, everything was dead on this branch, so that's why I'm going to prune it. It can be that there was beautiful blossoms, so much growth here, so much beauty, but still there's more if you just let me prune this. Like God has definitely spoken that over me since January, I think is when I really realized like, oh, that's what's going on is the spiritual pruning, even financially, and now I'm starting to see the fruit of that. I'm seeing the new growth from that even in my marriage, our communication and our financial goals and our not having that financial anxiety that we had off and on throughout our whole marriage, that I know that the pruning has needed to happen in order for us to have that better communication and awareness. And it's so good. It's so good on the other side. So if whoever's listening right now, if you feel that you are being maybe financially pruned, spiritually pruned, or you're just in that messy middle and you're just like, I don't even see my way out. I don't understand why I'm going through this right now. Hang in there, because it's when the clarity comes and you look back and go, that's why. It's so worth it.
So good.
It's so
It's so good. And as you're talking about pruning, so one of the things that we talk about in Radiant Leadership Academy, which is kind of what started this whole dismantling, because when you go through that as a member, and I'm finishing up my third round of actually teaching it, like I'm getting convicted weekly by takeaways, and then I'm also like going through it myself and being pruned. But one of the stories that we talk about is the wine vines. They have to be pruned 90%.
wow.
And so it's very shocking, like when it comes to the fall, and like you drive past a vineyard and like everything's trimmed back 90%. And the reason that we found out why they prune it back is because it won't be able to hold the new growth if it's not pruned back. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like how amazing in that, like we're being pruned because God has so much more growth and he needs us to be able to have strong branches and be equipped to like actually carry that
Oh,
fruit.
that's so good. If only we'll let him, like how often do we resist it? And we're like, no, I don't trim that branch. No, I'm keeping it. Like, please don't trim that and don't prune that. And he's not going to force it. That's the thing, is the Lord's not going to force the pruning necessarily. I mean, maybe at times he will, but I just know that a lot of times in my life, I've been so resistant and just holding tight to like, you can have this branch, but not this branch. Like, don't get down to the root. Like, let's not go that deep. Like, just trim the easy stuff off, and now it's so different now. Like, take it all, Lord.
I think with the pruning process, we will be pruned. It's just a matter of how easy is the pruning process, because I think if we resist it, it might prolong it and also makes it harder. Because if we were just like in that posture, I love to talk about the posture of surrender to receive. So when you're in a posture of surrender, you're also setting yourself up to be in a posture to receive. That it just like comes naturally, and I feel like there'd be more flow in the pruning process. And instead, I feel like we come into this like, oh, we like, you can't see me what I'm doing. I need to explain what I'm doing in the podcast. I'm closing my hands up, acting like I'm like strangling something, right? So it just makes things so much harder, versus if we can stay in that posture of surrender, then that pruning, I feel like, would flow a lot faster and we'd get to the other side. But our flesh, right? Our spirit is willing, but our flesh is weak. And it sucks to go through the pruning process. It's uncomfortable and it hurts.
It's so hard. And this is kind of funny, but so I grew up very conservative Christian, like the way that even the way that we worshiped, like we didn't even clap in
Yep.
church.
Yep. Same.
We have similarities. So now the church that I go to is still like very conservative, but there are people will put their hands up when we're singing praises, and I go to praise night, and I've been to praise night with other churches, and I've almost been like distracted and kind of uncomfortable because I'm thinking, well, maybe I need to be
Mhm.
raising my hands or, worshiping in the way that other people are. Anyway, I've grown in my spiritual maturity has grown so much that I'm not distracted by that anymore. But now it's so natural for me when I'm encountering the Holy Spirit and I'm singing praises and my hands just go open, palms up, hands open. And it's so natural. So as you were explaining that, with the like fists clenched, holding on, like, no, don't take this, don't prune this, versus just hands open and in full surrender every part of my life. And that is a scary prayer. That is a scary surrender. It can be like honestly very scary to like every part of my life is yours, Lord. Take what is not meant to be here, and it's all yours, all of it. And that is scary in a way, but when we have faith and trust in him that he's never going to hurt us,
Mhm.
he's never going to harm us, it's all for our good. And yeah, like I said earlier, when you start seeing the clarity of coming of like, that's why you did that, Lord, I'm so grateful that I had my hands open to you in full surrender. So worth it.
Yes. So for those of you who have actually listened to the last two podcasts, you would have heard my story of how I made the decision to start grief counseling. And so as of this episode, I just had my very first session with that counselor. The reason I chose her though is that she also specializes in like inner healing and deliverance. So she's a very strong Christian and is informed within the spiritual realm, but she's also a licensed counselor. So I loved having that both where she can, yes, hold me from like a clinical perspective, but also like we can go to war if we need to in the spiritual realm together. And so I told you after making that decision, I already felt so much joy and freedom. But then coming out of that first session, like so much, I just felt so much more freedom, even just sharing my story and working it out in community and again releasing it. Like I told her stuff I haven't told people, like anybody before, or like maybe 4 people know some secrets about me, right? And grieving different things. And there's just so much freedom in that and releasing that. Whereas the past year, I've been holding on with my hands clenched and feeling frustrated and oppressed and overwhelmed and dysregulated and overstimulated. And as soon as I opened my hands up and listened to that prompting of like the Lord, like, lean in here, I want to heal you in this area, like let me come in and do the work, let me rip out these weeds and tend to your branches. I mean, beauty just, I feel like just so much beauty and clarity has come this week than I've experienced in the past like year or just months in general.
Wow. That's amazing. That's incredible. That's such a testament of how important it is to go to let yourself feel the grief, but in community and
Yep.
with a professional. I've done the same thing. It was in February, I think it was. I did something called Freedom Academy, and I didn't even realize how much grief I had. I mean, I knew I was grieving the loss of 2 of my dads for sure. I mean, that's been so hard, but I didn't realize that there was grief there around friendship breakups.
Yeah.
When you leave a top position as a top leader, no matter how ethically you try to do that, there's still a lot of hurt that can happen. And along with that, and I know that a lot of it was part of the Lord's pruning process in my life, but nonetheless, it's still hard.
Yeah.
And I needed to grieve the loss of my very best friends. That was really hard. And once I went through that, where I had a professional to come alongside me, I also had community. I had people like you shared, having somebody a safe place where you can share your story,
Right.
and in saying the words that you don't even say out loud, but they're trapped inside. The feelings and the emotions are trapped inside, and saying it out loud and getting just that validation of like, this is a hard thing for you. That was hard for you, and we're sorry that happened to you. And not even playing into like, oh, the victimhood of it at
Right.
all, but just hearing the grief and hearing the
Mhm.
story that needs to be held so it can be rewired and rewritten.
Right. Yes, I know. I love, so Carrie Garcia, for those of you who don't know what she's referring to, is the creator of the Freedom Academy. And I do encourage you to listen to her podcast called The Honest Pod. So
Hmm.
good. I've learned that's listening to her podcast was one of the reasons I even knew I needed to grieve. Because
Oh,
she'd be
really?
speaking about things and I'm like, oh, that hits something like, oh, maybe that is why I feel this way, is because I do have unprocessed trauma and unprocessed emotions, and I'm just, yeah, what the enemy keeps using over and over. And yeah, so just that brought so much awareness to me of what I like. She was putting words to my experiences
Hmm.
I was going through internally, but I didn't really understand or know even what to do to get help for it. And so, yeah, so I definitely encourage you guys to listen to her podcast, The Honest Pod. If you're a GPA member, just caveat, like I've already got her in the works to be a mastermind a presenter for us on one of our calls. So stay tuned for that.
Oh, that'll be
But
good.
yeah,
She's
she's so awesome.
incredible. Her story is so good. And just the way, so what she did at Freedom Academy is she private messaged me during this 3-day workshop and said, hey, would you be willing to share your story and let us coach you through that, like publicly? I think there was like 60 people on this workshop, and I didn't even know what I was getting myself into. I was
Right.
like, sure. I was like the case study. And I mean, I'm end up where I'm just sobbing in
Yeah.
front of these people, but I wasn't even worried about the people at that point. There was so much healing in that. And it was Carrie, and then she had another coach on there. There was like a group of 5 of them
Mhm.
that were really holding my story, and all the other participants in this workshop, they turned off their camera, and they had the settings so that when they turned off their camera, then their screen would disappear. Like
Oh,
we
yeah.
couldn't see all other like 55 people on the screen. So it felt very intimate for me and
Mhm.
very safe. And then after she took me through this process. Then when they turned their cameras back on and they unmuted themselves, they started coming back on, and they were, each person would say what was coming to them after experiencing, as they witnessed what I went through. And they said, Jodeen, I want you to know I love and accept you just as you are. I love and accept you. Every person that came on, there was dozens and dozens of them, and they're like, I love and accept you just as you are. And after I shared such a vulnerable story, and I was so almost apologetic about it, because I was like, I'm sorry I'm being such a big baby. I was kind of embarrassed. But once I got into it and then saw how they loved and accepted me, no matter my part in the story, I was still held. And it was just, I mean, it was so healing. It was so fantastic. So yeah, if you get an opportunity to have Carrie train your cohort, like,
Oh,
incredible. It's gonna be amazing.
yes. Was Tori Hine one of them?
Yeah.
Do you know
Yep.
Tori? Yeah.
Yeah.
Tori is awesome. She also has so many good reels, and I'm like, oh, I feel that way too. And I didn't know I was allowed to feel that way. Or like that's another thing, is just awareness to my feelings and thoughts I've happened. I've been like, oh, this is like a trauma related response, or this
Yeah.
is I don't have to feel this way. And so it has brought up these questions of, okay, this is shaking my life up, because I've gone, I'm 36. I was like, how old am I? 36, and, gone through 30 plus years of beliefs and being programmed to do certain things and behave a certain way. And I have to be this type of leader and this type of example and be this type of mom and be this type of all of these expectations. And a lot of them, like God has worked with me on, but there's still things where I was just like, oh, I'm a, that makes sense when she like Tori will do like amazing reels. So Tori Hine, if you're listening, I'm shouting you out. I love her reels too, because she'll, they're just bite-sized chunks, but I'm just like, oh, she's asking questions that are just blowing my life apart in the best way.
So good. I had her on my podcast as a
Mhm.
guest
Yeah.
last spring or summer, I think it was. And and that was kind of my first introduction also to like emotional trauma and like, oh,
Yeah.
I have trauma in my story. Because I used to think of trauma as like this really
Right.
like I wasn't in the war. I wasn't like,
Right. Yeah.
I thought of trauma like that. But yeah, Tori's helped me a lot with also understanding some of the reasons why I experienced trauma as a top leader, because we both were in, her and I were both in the same company. And yeah, she helped me a lot with just understanding some of those big emotions that I was feeling and the hurt that I was experiencing, and maybe why I allowed myself to get so deep into a company that my identity became my role in that company.
Right.
The idolatry that I was awakened to, that I had made success or title or position or a company, and all of those became like idols in my life. And that's part of the pruning process that had happened for me. It was just stripping back those layers first, relaying, like I said, relaying that foundation, and then operating business from a much healthier perspective where my identity is not tied to my success or my performance.
Yes.
And that's a much healthier place to come from. So before we hit record, we were talking about like taking sabbaticals and working from a place of rest, and how that was such a foreign concept for me in my world of network marketing, that I felt as a leader, a top leader, speed of the leader, speed of the pack, you know, like I was so driven to perform for my team, because if I wasn't performing in a way that was duplicatable, they weren't going to do it.
Yeah.
So I always had to be on, always had to be performing, always had to be showing them the vision of this is the life that you could have, and this is how hard you need to work. And, you know, it's, and I'm not saying, I'm not blaming anybody or anything. I was in a vulnerable place where I took that role on so deeply that I couldn't see, I felt like there was shame when it came to taking a rest.
Right.
I felt embarrassed if I were to, one time I was out and about shopping, and I ran into another top leader, and I was like, oh no, like it's close day. What are we doing shopping? We should be like showing the team like how you work to the very end. You just keep going to the last minute of last day of the month. And I look at that now, I'm like, that is so, we are human beings. We are out and about, like living our lives and having other priorities. And that's okay. And that's normal. And that's healthy. That even, you know, okay, this is one of the things that we had talked about, that think of like college professors, like university professors or top corporate executives. It is not uncommon for those high level positions to take intentional sabbaticals. And oftentimes their sabbaticals are paid for, to take long vacations, extended vacations, but intentional sabbaticals are so healthy and so common, but not as common in the entrepreneurial or network marketing space. And so it's kind of like my mission to change that, because I feel that we are actually far more creative, far more productive, have way more like a healthier performance when we have intentional sabbaticals. And I think about this last winter where I just didn't have this in me to do a lot. I just was like, I don't want to. I don't want to like hustle. I don't want to do my marketing. I just didn't have the creativity of like, I didn't have the vision of like, what's next? How can I serve people? And I look back now and I know that was I finally realized kind of like 3/4 of the way into it, that actually this is a sabbatical. This is a period of rest. This is like nature hibernates. Why not me? And I needed that. My soul needed that. My connection in my relationship with the Lord needed that. And so there's a difference between shame with taking a break versus an intentional sabbatical and working from a place of rest rather than working from a place of hustle and grind. So I learned a lot from that. So I just want to encourage whoever's listening, like, dude, take the sabbatical. You need to take some time off this summer. That's okay. Be intentional about it. You don't want to like hurt anybody in the process, but if you communicate well what it is that you're needing and you're showing the example of working from rest and having a kind of a timeline on that, an intentional sabbatical can do amazing things for your health, your mental health, and for even your business.
Yes.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
We want to take a moment and extend to you a special invite to partner with us in Girl Power Alliance. Inside Girl Power Alliance, we are so focused on helping you step into your kingdom identity and becoming the woman that God designed you to be. That's what the entire membership is built around. Inside of our membership, you have access to over 300 different modules, weekly live coaching calls, ICF certifications, and more that you get to plug into. Plus, you have a rich opportunity to build an income by sharing those things with others. We are a completely digital platform, so you don't have to worry about shipping product or providing things for people. We do all of that for you. You get the fun of just promoting and sharing Christ-centered resources to others. You have access to the opportunity of starting a digital business for less than $500, and your monthly overhead is less than $200 a month. To be a VIP member, it's only $150 a month, and yet the ability to grow in income has no limit to it. We are trying to bring kingdom believers back into the room. We have a vision of seeing more kingdom entrepreneurs in the world and more financially free believers that love Jesus. If you want to be in that room, make sure you connect with us. Join our movement by clicking on the link in the show notes. And we can't wait to welcome you into our family. Yes. And like that was one of the things that inspired me by you. Like, I don't know. I feel like maybe I did message you maybe back in like January, February, March, but you had posted on your Facebook, like, I just feel like winter. I feel like wintering, and I don't, just because it's January 1st doesn't mean I want to jump into a new year, new me. And I was like, girl, you're taking the thoughts right out of my mind. Like, yes. Well, and I literally lost my voice for a week in, I don't know, was it March maybe, where I couldn't even talk. And so it was like almost like a forced rest, which was really inconvenient because I was teaching 2 classes. And I'm like, I don't know. It worked out, but it was not fun for me to not talk for a week. But yeah, like, and Carrie Garcia, she's like, I take the whole month of June off. And I'm just like, I love that. And these are principles and strategies. I'm like, wait, I'm allowed to do that? Is that a thing? Like, it's okay. Like, the world's not going to explode if we are not leading in this way, or we're not serving like for an entire month, or our way of serving and leading looks different. Like, that's where my mind has been, and why I feel like I'm coming out of this messy middle, because literally like, these new concepts of like, oh, this is what a way rest can look like. Oh, this is how you can lead. Oh, this is how you can get creativity. And it's not what all the gurus and like all the people are saying. It's completely different.
Yeah.
And I mean, we've been talking about rest for years. Like when you and I talked, that was one thing we connected on, was like, yes, like I've been talking about operating from a place of rest, but I feel like God's even taken me deeper into the meaning of what that entering into his rest looks like, and how leading looks like. And I've had to, one of the things I journaled in the last couple of weeks was, who is Brandie without a business? Who is Brandie without social media presence? Can Brandie just be a daughter of the king? And that was like a big question. That was kind of a point of freedom for me, but it was also like, again, coming to the altar and laying down, like, what if God does take my business away? Because my desires were shifting in that area. And I'm like, am I even called to business anymore? What does it look like for me to be in business? And since then, I've made some pivots, even in this week with my business, from that clarity that I gained. But it was almost like I had to strip everything that I thought was a part of my identity down to my true identity, which I am just a daughter of the king, and that is more than enough.
Oh, amen. I love that so much. It feels so good. Doesn't that just feel amazing? I feel like since high school, my identity has been around my performance. What I did, how I served, how smart I was, what I accomplished, what certifications, what degree, and even my appearance, what I looked like. So much of my identity. And now it's like I went in my Instagram stories last night, and I'm not wearing my eyelashes anymore. I'm not getting my nails done. And I just like had no makeup on. I just had worked out, and I'm like, this is me. Like, this is just me being real. And maybe it's a midlife crisis because I'm going to be 50 in February. Like, I
Yeah.
am like, so crazy, but I don't feel old. I feel like I'm still
I
just,
can't believe you're 50. Like, you're gorgeous, Jodeen. Like, I'm like, you're 35. You're the same age as me.
I feel like I am. And I
Yes.
will say though, like mid 30s are really powerful years.
Mhm.
They really are. Like that's where you really kind of step into your own. You know who you are, not just a mom, but I mean being a mom, I don't mean not just a
Right.
mom, but
Yeah.
there is more to you than even that. And
Mhm.
that's the most important job as a mom is to be a mom. But being just a child of the Lord, like just I'm just a child of God, feels amazing.
Yeah.
Like that is so beautiful. And I wanted to say too that even, remembering on the topic of rest, that even Jesus
Mhm.
rested.
Yes.
Like my mind was just blown earlier when we were talking about how Jesus lived 33 years here on earth, and only 3 of those years were where he was doing ministry. And he knew that his time on earth was limited. And his job, the most important, biggest job out of any human being on the face of this earth ever, is to literally save the souls of mankind.
Mhm.
Like that is huge responsibility. And he knew he needed to do that in such a short amount of time. And he did that, but he also, like, he rested a lot.
Mhm.
He took breaks, and there wasn't shame around that. He knew that that's what he needed. He needed to distance himself, to go to the garden, to grieve, to weep, to spend time in communion with just the Lord, with just relationship with God. And then also he also had community. He also had his friends.
Yeah.
And I just think it's such a beautiful example.
Yes. And yes, one of the things that I love about what you said, like he went and he was with the Father and he was about the Father's business and he wept in the garden by himself. But I was also reminded of like he wept with Lazarus, or he wept for Lazarus with Mary and Martha in that community too. So I love that he shows both sides of like, yes, we can grieve in the garden with just the Father, and like, and I've had those sessions where I'm like punching him in the chest and then I'm screaming and I'm crying and it's just like getting it all out type moment. And then there's like the grieving moments when we need that community. We need that. We need to share these real life experiences with in relationship, and where he would eat with his followers. He would celebrate. He went to weddings with his followers. He cried with his followers. So he did life with community. He was not ever doing anything alone. And so I really like that aspect of getting to know Jesus and who he was too on
Mm-hmm.
his journey. And then there's something else, but it's not coming to me, so maybe I'm not supposed to say it.
If it comes up to you, it comes up, let me know. It's
Yeah.
just, there comes, I realized this winter when I was really just in my wintering season. And before I had started the grief in community, I was really disconnecting. I was
Yeah.
connecting with the Father, but I was disconnecting from
Yes.
other people. And there came a point where I realized that it was kind of unhealthy, that it
Mhm.
was unhealthy, that I needed to lean back into community,
Mhm.
into friendships with people that I trust.
Yeah.
It's important to do that.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. And I had a similar experience too, where I was like, all right, I've been journaling and praying and do all these things by myself, and it's worked up to a certain point, but I'm at the point now where I need to get back into community because now it's becoming unhealthy and like I can't get out of my own head, and like I'm hearing too many voices and I need somebody to help silent voices that are not of God, and just get all these voices out of my head, and
Mhm.
speaking them is such a healing way to do that as well.
Yeah. I agree. So good. We're meant for that. And I just now, we're talking about the messy middle. Maybe all our whole life is actually
It's a
the
mess.
messy middle. And I can't wait to be in eternity and
Yeah.
just, oh, it's going to be so good. And honestly, sometimes I'm just like, my soul just aches to go home.
Yes.
And I I know that my purpose is not fulfilled here, and I don't want to waste any time on it. But I just think that there are life is not meant to always be easy, but we can celebrate when things are good. And when they're not, now I feel that just with this conversation and whoever's listening, like we're even better equipped on knowing how to work through the highs and the lows, especially those lows. And it's just nice to be coming out of the other side of the that pruning process where I'm seeing new growth. But you know what's interesting is that the new growth and the new blossoms are not what I would have predicted.
Yeah. They look
It's
completely different.
totally different. And even just financially, how God provides in ways that we don't expect when we let him provide, and we can say, this is how it's going to happen. This is how, financially things are going to come through. This is what I'm going to do. But when we just fully surrender and he just takes care of it. He
Yeah.
takes care of it in ways that we couldn't even, and I know I witnessed that with you just I think it was in the fall, where it was like things were opening up and you're like, I couldn't have even planned this. I had no idea that this is how he was going to provide. And it just gave me so much encouragement in that time, because I saw none of that happening for me. But to see things happening for you was like, okay, just hang in there a little bit longer. Just, he's so faithful. He is so faithful, and he won't leave us. If only we just surrender.
Yeah. One of the things I've been studying and practicing is looking more at the promises than the problem, and the promise of Romans 8:28, where God is working all things for our good. Even
Yes.
if the circumstances we're facing are things that we got ourselves into, or they're completely out of our control, if we continue to seek and turn back to him and repent and continue just to follow and seek his kingdom, like he is working all things for our good. And the enemy's going to try to put a spirit of fear on you and just twist the good things, but God is always going to work, and we already have the victory. And so learning to step into that posture. We talked about the posture of surrendering to receive, but also the posture of just like, you already have the victory. And some things have come up this week where my flesh kind of took over for a minute, and then I was like, no, like Romans 8:28, God's going to work this out. I'm expecting a miracle. I'm expecting things to fall into place. And if they don't, he's going to give me more than enough on the back end to redeem and restore what was lost on the front end. And so I don't think I would have been in that place to behave and respond that way if I hadn't taken steps to go through grief counseling and like get back into community and do the work that I've been doing. I feel like I would have gotten stuck in victim mode and just spiraled.
Totally.
And so that again, coming back to like, it is so important to come back into community and relationship and seek God, but also have like a beautiful community of people that you can tap into, whether they're in a professional sense or just like your sisters in Christ, that they're your Aaron and hers holding your arms up in the battle. And I'm blessed enough, you're one of them, to be like one of my Aaron and hers in different seasons to like help me keep, my arms in the air when I feel like I'm too tired and I can't keep, I can't stay in this battle any longer. And the thing that I wanted to say earlier that came to mind was, again, about Jesus resting and how he rested without really a care for how he was inconveniencing other people.
I love
That just came to my mind to be like, he had no shame. There was no shame or condemnation around his rest because he was being about his father's business. And if it inconvenienced his disciples, or I would have to go back and look at a different story, but I know people would be like, where's Jesus? And he's like, I don't know. Like his disciples would be like, I don't know where he's at. He's gone again.
Yeah. Yeah. He did what his soul was needing, and that is something we can learn from. And I talk about this a lot, is like, self-care is great. Like, sure, get your hair done, get your nails done, take a bath, I don't know, but it's so temporary.
Right.
It's so fleeting. It's not actually what it is that you're needing. What we need is soul care. Like, and that's what Jesus was demonstrating. And it's not always going to be convenient.
No.
It's not for other people, and or even for ourselves. We can say, well, when I get this done, and then when this happens, and then I can slow down when this happens. But when we know when we've hit a spot where like, I need to stop, I need to rest right now. My soul is needing the Heavenly Father, and I need to be in relationship with him. I need to go to the garden. I need to grieve. I need to, it's never going to be the perfect time to do any of that.
No.
If you're feeling it and you know you need it, right now is actually the perfect time. But there's not going to be like a worldly perfect time.
No. Because the world doesn't want you to practice the number one law is the Sabbath. That was the first thing God taught us. Well, I feel like the first thing was delegation because he delegated to Adam and Eve, like, here, you have all of creation, go rule over it and name them. And then he's like, I'm going to go over here and rest.
Yeah.
So like delegate and rest are like the first two principles I feel like God displays for the humans on earth. And those are, I think, the top two things that we suck at as humans because we're in the fallen world now is delegating, especially as women, delegating and resting. And if we would just do those two things once, weekly, how much better would our lives be? I don't know, because I haven't practiced it enough to figure it out. But I know that when I do practice, like literally taking the Sabbath off, and I'm getting better, like not being on social media on the weekends and like not trying to schedule a bunch of stuff on the weekends and either doing a Saturday or Sunday Sabbath. It's like, it's so much refreshing, and I can just.
It is. It's so peaceful. And I had it written down. I had a quote somewhere and I don't see it on my desk, but it was that the greatest like weapon to use against the enemy is rest. And that's exactly what he does not want us to do. He wants us to be chaotic. He wants us to be busy and that'll even be disguised as good. Oh, good job. Pat on the back. You are busy. Look at all the yard work you got done. Look at how much your business has grown. Look at how involved you and your family are and everything out there. You're serving people, but you're depleting your soul and you're not making time for that rest and restoration and that Sabbath rest. There's, like I said, self-care or being lazy are very different than really like soul care or like spiritual rest in the Lord. Sabbath rest is everything. It is everything. That is so imperative that by the time Friday rolls around, I'm ready. I'm done with my phone. I want to put it away. I want to put social media away. I don't want to think about business. I don't want to think about what it is that I need to do because I know come Sunday night or Monday morning, or even sometimes not till Monday afternoon, the ideas start popping, the creativity is there. But I have so much more peace entering into Monday than I do when I don't honor Sabbath.
I agree with you.
So
Well,
important.
Jodeen, we've been talking for, I don't know, maybe almost an hour now. It's been amazing. I always love talking to you, and I could have a whole nother hour conversation with you. I would love for you to just share any final thoughts before we wrap up on this topic of being in the messy middle.
A messy middle, just stay encouraged that you can't get away from it. Life is going to be hard, and nobody's coming to rescue you out of it. No other human being, no performance, no business, no amount of money is going to rescue you. It's really all about relationship with the Lord. And that's what I would say is that no, your knight in shining armor isn't coming, sister. Like it's up to you to do the work, the internal work, and just rest in the Lord. And hang in there. It gets better. It gets better. It really does. And life doesn't mean life is going to be perfect, but you will have a moment where you can breathe. You'll have that fresh air and you'll have the clarity of, oh, I see why that happened. Now I'm even more equipped for whatever it is that life is going to throw at me next, or whoever else is going through something. I'm even more equipped to help pull them through the pit and point them to Jesus.
Yes. Amen to that. I would say we just got to keep going through it. Just keep going through it one step at a time with Jesus holding your hand. And you will, like Jodeen said, you will come out on the other side. And you can do it with the joy of the Lord and his strength when you're feeling that weakness too. That's, I think, a lesson or like a verse that keeps coming to me is like, in my weakness, he is made strong. Like I get to use his strength, and it's okay to be weak. I can boast in my weakness. And that's kind of, the inspiration behind this is like, I'm boasting in my weakness right now because God's getting the glory for this. He is doing a new thing. He's making a new way as long as I'm willing to go through it with him.
Yes. So if sometimes people are so in such a spot where they can't even find the Lord, And if that is somebody that's, I feel like I really need to say this right now, like go in your closet, close the door. I don't care how small your closet is, get in the closet or stay in your car. If it's parked in the garage and it's dark in there, put on some praise music, find a song, listen to something, and just ask for him, and he will be there. Just find a quiet place, even if just for a few moments. Get out the word, the living, breathing, holy Bible. And I mean, there was a night the other night when I couldn't sleep and I just read the whole book of Romans, and it was just so good. So I just want to encourage you, if you're looking for the Lord and you can't find him, find a quiet place and he will find you. He's there holding you right now. So lean into him more than ever. You'll find him.
Yes, so good. Well, thank you so much, Jodeen, for hanging out with me today. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. We would love to hear from you. So please share your takeaways by tagging @LiveVictorious over on Instagram and leave a review.
This will help us get more visibility and reach more women like you for the kingdom. We appreciate you and are praying for you as you shine your light in the business world and rise to your purpose.